Anybody have any questions?
You know, he's worked in a lot of different print mediums, but when he comes up with an idea to make a print, how does he then decide on a particular method of printmaking to coincide with the idea of that painting, so to speak?
He mostly now works in etching. We have a studio set up there. There's a litho press there, and there's litho plates. And he's done, I mean, he simply takes out a plate and starts drawing on it. He really is his own person about all of this. I feel very fortunate to share it with him, but he tells me what he wants to do and I just do it. In some cases, like recently a project I said, well, why don't you let me do that? And then about 2 weeks later he called me and he said, you know, I think I'm going to let you do that. And that was it. So that gives me the possibility to do something for him. But otherwise, he does all this stuff himself. He pulls out a plate, and he says, get it ready, and if it's an etching plate, you degrease it, and you have no idea what he's going to want to do. If he's going to want to put a sugar lift on it, or if he's going to want to put an aqua tint on it, he'll tell you, let's put an aqua tint on this, and then I'll do a drawing, and we'll etch it and see what it looks like. And that's the way it starts. It's that simple. Yes?
You're such an integral part of the whole process. There ought to be two names on it.
Well, that's one thing, yes.
Mechanistic as well as artistic.
Well, yes, but you know what? None of us would be in this room if it wasn't for Jasper Johns. I mean, that's why we're here. And we certainly didn't come here because of me. But I contributed part of it, and I felt very grateful to be able to do that. That's really it.
Well, when did you start working with Jasper?
1969.
And can you just briefly say how you came to ULAE? Or?
I was, I told this couple here that was here earlier. I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, and I was studying lithography and printmaking and painting and drawing. And I was drafted into the U.S. Army, and I got out of the, I'm from Oklahoma. And if you were from Oklahoma, you went if they drafted you. There was no getting out of it. Minnesota, all my buddies in Minnesota, they just wrote a letter saying I'm in school, and that was it. But I could write a letter, I could do anything, it didn't matter. I visited with the state selective service director. I'd finished 1 year of my graduate degree, towards my graduate degree, and I still had 1 more year to go because Minnesota's master's program was 2 years. And so I went down to Oklahoma and I met with General Hershey. And his son had been wounded in Vietnam the week before. He was a second lieutenant. And he said, I'm sorry, man, we need you there badly and you have to go. So I was drafted into the U.S. Army. But when I went into the Army, they asked me what could I do, and I said I could be a printer. And so they made me a printer. And I ran a commercial print shop for the U.S. Army. I was stationed at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And as I said to these lovely people earlier, I said, when you run a printing press, you're everybody's friend. And so I got to be friendly with all the people on the post. And when it got ready to get out, I asked how I could get out early. And one of the guys that I was friendly with was in charge of discharging. And so he told me that I could get out early to go back to school. So I got out 90 days early. And I got out on the 9th of June. And I was in graduate school by the 15th or 16th of June. And the 17th of June, I had flown to New York as a part of that to print at this workshop. And in those days, we were working on a print. Jasper had done a print called Passage 1. And from Passage 1, he had done Passage 2. And the plates were still in the studio, lying around with ink in them for Passage 3. And it was my job to wash the ink out of those plates. Jasper was coming, and my job to wash the ink out of those plates and roll them up and print them. so that we could see what passage 3 could look like. And passage 3 was going to be a circular print. Well, I couldn't get the ink out of the plates. It had dried in the plates. The printer that before, when he proofed them, he didn't wash them out, and so I couldn't get the ink out of the plates. Nothing happened that year as a result of it. Jasper didn't want to do anything at the point. But things began to get rock and roll a little bit in 1970. And by 1971, I had suggested we buy an offset lithographic press because that's what I'd done in the Army. And I could see that replacing the old hand litho press, not replacing it, but at least offering an alternative to it, which I did. And Mrs. Grossman agreed, and we bought a press. And we installed it in a small real estate building, paid $90 a month for this space, put this press in this building. And believe me, this press would occupy almost half of this room, but the building we were in wasn't half of this room. So you had about this much space you could walk along one side of the press. Well, Mrs. Grossman was doing a book of Jasper John's publications. All the prints he had ever done, she wanted to do a book. And the goal was to reproduce each one of these prints on the same paper that it was printed on originally. Well, that wasn't too difficult because that was only 10 years, 11 years we were beginning to work with it. So Jasper started making his first prints at ULAE in 1960. So we were just moving along slowly and trying to get that done. And we hired a printer to run the offset press because she wouldn't leave me alone. I had to do this, I had to do that. I had to go with her to do this, I had to go. What I didn't know is she was actually grooming me to take over this business. And so I was learning all this stuff on the side and working and carrying stuff to Jasper and showing him this. And he said one day, he says, "Where are you getting all this stuff, Bill? What are you printing this on?" And I said, "Well, I have an offset press over in Bayshore." He said, "Well, why can't I see it?" So we all got in the car. Now, what you got to understand, Mrs. Grossman had made her business on the uniqueness of each one of these prints. They were printed from the stone, they were drawn on the stone, they were drawn on the plate, they were printed from the plate, directly from the plate onto the paper. The artist looked at every sheet, signed it, numbered it, controlled it, and that was the work. I mean, you almost had to say a prayer over each one of these prints to put it out the door so big collectors could have it. In fact, one woman came into the studio one day and looked at this beautiful Rosenquist, and she said, "I love it. Do you have it in blue?" And Mrs. Grossman showed her the door immediately. That was an insult beyond possible you could possibly say. But what we did with this press, we went over to the studio, and Mrs. Grossman was so adamant that she said, "You can't show him that press because that's offset printing. And offsets, people think that's thousands and hundreds of copies." Well, let me explain something to you about offset printing. There are two kinds of printing. There's a direct printing, which is true. The artist draws on the stone, draws on the plate. You lay a piece of paper on that surface. You put a lot of pressure on the back side of that paper, and when you take it off, you get a mirror of what he's drawn on the plate. That means if he's made a mark like this, it looks like that. That's confusing for a lot of people that work in the visual media. Offset printing is exactly what it says it is. It's indirect printing. The drawn plate is here, the stone is here. The paper is not put on top of that. The paper is put over here. A soft rubber vulcanized blanket that very receptive to ink passes over the image and picks it up. And guess what? It reverses it. And then when it prints it back on the sheet, guess what? It prints it back in the same orientation as it was drawn. And that was a big deal for Jasper Johns. And in 1971, when we published Decoy, and we did 18 plates and one stone on Decoy, and we did the 18 plates on the lithographic press at the studio, the offset, and the 1 stone on the hand lithographic press. He didn't work in any other studio for 16 years. We worked in that studio continuously for 16 years because he could just draw whatever he wanted to. I set it up so that he could set the plate out, draw on the plate, process the plate, you know, put the plate on, print the plate, show it to him. We could do 6 or 8 printings a day. And he was thrilled with working like that because it's the thinking process. When you're thinking and you're not having to think, oh, I got to think backwards on this. I got to get this backwards because I got to write it back. I mean, you know, for years I had put mirrors up for an artist to draw in the mirror and write it backwards so they could draw it backwards so it would read right when you printed it. Now we didn't have to do that. So she was completely upset. And she said, she came over to the studio and we were working and things were just going absolutely amazing. She came in, she stood in for 5 minutes and then she left. And in the evening she said, the electricity in that room was so incredible, I couldn't even enter. So we still do the same thing, we still work in it. We now have 3 of those offset presses. We also have 3 of the hand presses, but we have 3 of the offset presses. And we use them continuously for the etchings, for the litho, for everything that goes on. We use them for anything possible. And now we're big into digital, doing digital stuff too with it. And we make all that stuff for the press. I mean, it's just become a phenomenon. But the one thing, you know, Bob Rauschenberg said something really interesting. And I thought it was one of the most poignant things that could be said about contemporary art. You do not know what the definition of painting is, or even drawing is, because it changes as new technology becomes available. And every time there's new technology, you've got a new definition. And it is the moral responsibility of all artists to execute that responsibility. You've got to go out there, you've got to draw things. You can never say that art is this. Art is what the artists are making, and that's what it is. And they got to be making it with whatever is available to them. If you think that Giotto wouldn't have loved to have oil paints, I mean, I can tell you, he would have. Maybe that egg was, you know, can you imagine the ads for Giotto? These eggs were bought from a farmer that only raises the most special eggs, and the egg white was mixed a certain way. You know, that's the point. Why do you want to do that when you can make oil paints that you can work on for days or you can, you know, play with? Egg temper was so finicky and so hard to work with. Lead pencils, graphite pencils, you know, just the simple thing, the simple things that are happening. Digital printing. You go into the next room over there and there's somebody working with digital printing. You look at that, it looks like painting, but it's digital printing. I mean, it's really interesting what artists are doing. And one of the things, I'm showing you Jasper Johns. This is what I love, this is what I do. But there are so many other things that are going on that are interesting to look at.
How do you decide how many prints are made of each one?
Well, you decide quite often, like I described on that one. The technique describes it for you. It defines it for you. I mean, you print a lot of sheets, you finish a lot of sheets, and then you collect a group that look all the same, and you throw the rest of them away. That's the way it is. If you're lucky enough to have all the paper in the world. If you don't have all the paper in the world on something like that, then you end up, you know, with whatever you get, say 45, 50, 44, 43.
So you don't decide that ahead of time that we're going to do 50 of this?
Oh, you know, I mean, I'd love it. Sometimes, you know, I see an image and I say, I know this thing's going to sell like crazy and it's just going to be great. So we'll make 100 of these. So we go out and we print 150 sheets, but then something happens along the way and there you are, you know, you're back to 44, 45, something like that. It's all the quality control. That's what determines it. Used to be, Mrs. Grossman liked to say, it's what we can print in one day. But if I was printing shrinking inks, or if I was printing this, all I could do in one day would be 6.
Just so no one has to get up, since this is the most recent.
This is the most recent piece. Now, okay, here we got 10 plates. Here we got 3 plates. But we got 11 colors. And we got a master working with spit bite. Spit bite is not easy to do because you know what? You got to convince the artist that you're not painting on the plate, you are etching on the plate. And the idea that you have to leave that area on there, you have to go back and you have to work it again. And spit bite, you know, tray etching. When I say tray etching, we pour a gallon of etch into a tray. We put the plate into the tray. You got plenty of etch there. The etch is replenished all the time. It's fresh. It keeps etching. It keeps etching. What happens if I brush this liquid on this surface of the plate? It etches and then fizzles. I got to take it off because I got to get another etch in there because it fizzles. It etches and then it's gone. It etches and then it's gone. It depletes itself. So in order to get this, you got to know what you are doing. You really have to understand it. Now, 11 colors, 3 plates. How do you do it? Well, this is a great thing because, you know, when a piece of paper goes through an etching press, it goes through at about 80,000 pounds of pressure per square inch on the back of that paper. So any piece of paper suffers every time it goes through the press. So you try to limit the amount of damage you do to the paper by the number of passes you go through the press. So in this case, he put the blue, and he put all these spots of color across the bottom on the blue plate. Because you can, you know, as a printer, you wipe the blue, then you can wipe the red, you can wipe the orange, and not mix the colors. So you're fine. You got those across there, everything looks, you know, you can print the blue plate. The red, well, red and yellow are pretty close together in terms of color. You know, you can keep the red out of the yellow. If the yellow gets in the red, it won't show too much, so you don't really worry about it. So red and yellow are on one plate, and then the black goes over the top of it. That makes the 3 printings. But where our technical problem started and ended was how to get these colors to dry at a rate that we could print on top of them. Because the blue has the black that goes over it, and you don't want the blue completely dry when you print the black because you've got to have some way to get that black to attach itself to that blue. And if that blue is totally dry, it seals the fibers of the paper and the ink won't go. It'll look not good. The black goes over the red too. So the red's got to be not too dry for the black to accept it. So how do you get the blue, which is, you know, let's say we can print, I think on this one we printed 4 plates a day on the blue. So we printed 4 impressions a day. So we might print 6 months on the blue. So we have to figure out some way with the blue and the red and the black that they combine and go together in the printing so that they're all drying at the same rate and they all go together at the same time. So we set up a rotation way of printing. We set up a way for printing the blue, the red, and then following with the black. And this is in a rotation so that we capture the drying cycle all at the same time. So we'll run maybe 10 sheets, 12 sheets, 15 sheets through the cycle, then 10, 15 sheets through the red and yellow cycle, then 10, 15 sheets through the blue cycle. Through the black cycle. So there we have the rotation set up to run through. So in that one, it's a little easier for us. We figured out a way to do it, but you can imagine the complexities of trying to get all that put together. I guess you can see this figure, and you see this figure, and you see in the shrinky-dinks that figure. That figure goes back to, you know, as I said, the seasons back in the 80s. And you can certainly, if you have a chance to look up Jasper Jones' Colored Seasons from 1987, a beautiful, beautiful group of prints, 4 prints. That figure is a shadow of an outline that he did of one of his friend's sons that was standing in a doorway, and he had him stand there, and he traced the shadow around it, and he's used it extensively through that time, through that period of time. Anyone else with questions? Please, I'm here. I'm going back to New York tomorrow. Everybody know about aquatents and good.
Thank you, and Bill will be here for the rest of the day. We have an opening tonight from 6 to 8, so feel free to visit and ask questions this afternoon, and hopefully you can come back tonight. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.